is Craig Scott. I'm the CEO of Fuuz, and you are joining us for the Manufacturing Matrix podcast here. And I have a special guest today that I would like to introduce, our head of engineering, Mr. Lance Menard. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Lance, if you don't mind. Just tell everybody a little bit about your background, your experience, and how you found yourself here at the wonderful Fuuz platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been an engineer for about 12 years in cloud software, software as a service, that kind of background. I've been with Fuuz and the kind of predecessors for 8 years now, or closing on 8 years, basically since the beginning. So you and I have known each other for a bit, and been able to see it through the whole evolution of the software, the team, the company, which has been a ton of fun. So.
Yeah, a ton of fun. It's
been a ride.
Challenges along the way.
It has been a ride.
A lot of learning and adapting and adjusting,
Mm-hmm.
right? As any good company, but I think even more so any good software platform should do. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know quite a bit about what you do in the office. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, and I don't know if anyone else is curious, but they might be. What do you do outside the office?
Yeah, my current second unpaid job basically is I run a Makerspace in Metro Detroit. So we have a workshop available. People can come in and take a class, learn how to do a new craft, hobby, 3D printing or laser cutting, or members can come in and use the tools and equipment to work on their own projects. And a fun little connection is we actually use an instance of the Fuuz software to manage all of our Makerspace operations. So we've got all of our member management and class schedule and tool database and all of that we've built in Fuuz. So
Wow.
it's an illustration of how flexible the software is.
Wow. So any of you Makerspace founders out there looking for a solution to help you run,
Exactly.
we should probably productize that and make an app out of it.
I think there's a real market for nonprofits to pay money for software. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's pretty exciting, and I think that's pretty awesome that what you've done in your personal, like outside of work life, actually still revolves around what you do for work.
Yeah.
Many people can't really say that.
Yeah. It is. Sometimes I wish there might be a little more separation.
Yeah.
But the best part is, I get the joy of working with the team at Fuuz and building software, and then I get the joy of watching people have kind of that light bulb moment, after work. You're teaching somebody how does a 3D printer work, right? It's a technology that a lot of people have heard about, but have no idea how it works. They get to watch one do its thing and kind of learn all about it, and like, oh, that's really cool. And then they get that moment of like, oh, I could do this. I could build this. I could make whatever, and you get the same thing with software at work with Fuuz. So
yeah, it's weird. It sort of ignites innovation.
Yeah,
Right.
Tagline.
I've heard that before somewhere. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of what you're doing with the Makerspace is, educating people and empowering people to be able to feel empowered to do things on their own with their own hands,
Exactly
with
right.
the tools, learning a trade. It's not that dissimilar to what Fuuz is to most, if not all, of our customers, actually. And I think one thing I wanted to, bring you in, you're super technical guy,
Generally.
So which is good, I guess, given your role.
Right. You would hope so.
We at Fuuz entrust a lot in Lance here and the entire team, for that matter. They all
it's
deserve
not just me.
cred. In maintaining the infrastructure and the scalability and the reliability of the Fuuz platform, because I think one thing that is very unique to Fuuz in the industry and in our specific kind of niche manufacturing software world, right?
Right.
Cloud software is not necessarily unique anymore as it was 30 years ago, but what is unique in our space is having a manufacturing platform that is cloud native, number one.
Yep.
And number two, software as a service with multi-tenancy, providing our customers with a lot of added benefits, we'll say, over what legacy options there are out there, the Avivas, Wonderwares, Ignitions,
Yeah.
you name it, right? And even, those custom homegrown systems.
Right. Yep.
So we'll get a lot of prospects that I'll talk to during a sales cycle that will ask me very bluntly, like, well, why would I buy Fuuz? Why would I spend, X on a Fuuz subscription when I can go and, download this other software and use it for free,
Yeah.
right? Until I'm ready to go live. And I say, well, where shall I begin? And that's why I brought you on the show here, because you're going to help us kind of unpack and understand a little bit more about why that is so significant, and maybe shed some light on what were some of the monumental challenges that we've had to overcome as a software provider to be able to do this for manufacturers, because frankly, there's no one else doing it.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a reason why, because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
So I'm just, kind of like lay that out a little bit. Maybe even if we take a step back in time to the early days when we were initially just solving problems and how things sort of evolved from, dare I say, V1 to V2 to V3.
Yeah. The whole technical history. Yeah. We'll go deep on the. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No. Yeah. In the early days, right, we were very focused on
2018.
Yeah, so long ago. Which, I mean, in the software world, that is, it's a while. Yeah. A lot has changed in the last 8 years. We were really focused on point solutions for specific problems for specific customers, very much sort of a custom consulting arrangement, and we would try to deploy and deliver those however we could for the customer,
By
right?
hook or crook.
Right, exactly. So that resulted in a really wide variety of solutions that were deployed, some sort of on-premise-ish, some through, browser extensions or whatever the case was. And we quickly realized that there are a lot of problems with that arrangement. I mean, first of all, from our perspective, just maintaining and supporting those kind of one-off things long-term doesn't work very well. But once you've handed a piece of software to a customer and said, all right, this is yours to deal with now, it's theirs to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. So now you're expecting them to take on the burden of maintenance, support, upgrades, right? Like making sure that it's running on compatible hardware and that hardware is staying up to date for anything that's on premise, even for things like, the kind of browser extension solutions. There are other issues like the underlying browser versions and things like that get to be problematic pretty quickly. So we discovered that really the best solution to make sure that we're delivering, kind of a consistent product across all of our customers is to do something in the cloud, right? I mean, it's the future. And there's a good reason for that, right? There's a good reason why that's the direction that a lot of software has moved. We started building out some cloud solutions focused initially on mostly iPaaS, integration platform as a service, moving data between software systems. And then, kind of the rest of the functionality kind of developed from there as we found things we needed or found things customers needed. So it's sort of the history, the evolution there.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in and redirect me if you'd like me to.
No, that's perfect. I think, and for everybody's benefit, that's hearing this, right? We didn't dream all of this up in a vacuum space. Right. The direction that was taken and some of the lessons that were learned that we applied to where we were going to go with the platform in the future was really taken from attempts at trying to use existing commercially available tools out there, right? Some of the ones I've mentioned, as well as things like Boomi and MuleSoft. And I mean, we were in the midst of deploying ERP for manufacturers, realizing that as with every ERP, there were limitations when it came to the shop floor.
Right.
Typically, and even though that system that we were working with, Plex at the time, had some, I would call it light manufacturing functionality, everybody who tries to buy ends up having to build in the end. So we did the same thing. We were buying, cobbling, solving problems, building solutions, creating multiple variants of what I would call architecture or technology stacks, almost like customer by customer.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then we realized that that was not scalable. We didn't want to be an integrator. We didn't want to be a service provider, because that's really all we were doing, was providing a service. And then the client became beholden to us from a support and maintenance standpoint.
Right.
Because they didn't understand what we built for them.
Right.
And so then we sort of evolved and realized that, hey, really what we want to be is a software provider. We want to provide an actual solution to a problem. We don't want to just provide an ongoing service and consulting engagement to continue to address your problems. So yeah, that's a great kind of history. And like you said, 2018 feels like forever ago, but really not in the software space, because most of the vendors that we were working with at the time had been around for decades already. So they were dinosaurs pretty much, and now they're prehistoric.
Yeah. Not fossils yet, but getting there.
Fossils. Yep. Yeah, they're definitely getting there. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how we made that transition. It's been a difficult transition to make. There's a lot of, I remember back in the day when we were talking about which database we should use for the back end of our system, we fell on Postgres, right? Originally.
Yep.
But really what I'm thinking about are, the nights I spent awake worrying about, is this thing going to like run through the night, right? It was, are we going to shut someone down because now we are on the hook for this infrastructure, which is the big point of our conversation today is why is Fuuz different than all these other solutions, right? And what it does for our customer is it provides them the ability to sleep at night. They don't have to worry about the architecture failing. They don't have to worry about the network issues between the database and the application layer. They don't need to worry about, and they also don't need to worry about coming back to the software vendor, i.e. us, and ask us to develop a new stored procedure for them or an API, or because they want access to some data that's in our system. Right. So you've used some of these other tools. I think you had hands in like Boomi and Ignition, some of these other things that we've used, Kepware, right? We've used them all. From your perspective as a software engineer, if I owned a manufacturing company and you were looking for a job and I hired you and I said, Lance, I want you to come in and I want you to make an MES platform for my company. We have 20 sites globally, right? Just walk me through the thought process if Fuuz didn't exist, because I'm sure you would call me up and be like,
of course,
I need a subscription.
Naturally, yeah.
But let's just say that this is like pre-2018. There is no Fuuz. Where do you start? First, you're probably going to build a team, right? You're gonna
skill
sets,
right? Yeah. The first sort of question that I would want to hash out is on-prem or in the cloud or hybrid, right? Because there are still some companies out there that are not used to the fact that we're moving to the cloud.
And a little conservative.
Right, exactly. Which, it makes sense in a lot of ways. I understand that mindset. But that's the first thing that you want to hash out, because that will decide who you need to hire.
Yeah.
But
so I would say hybrid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. That's a common deployment, right? That's basically how Fuuz works. So in that case, you're going to need cloud engineers. You're going to need folks who understand, AWS, right, or Azure, wherever your kind of cloud provider is, You're going to need folks who understand sort of the network infrastructure, kind of on premise, right? So you're going to need kind of IT level folks,
Sure.
operations, and you're going to need at least one or two business analysts who can understand the kind of business process and actually drive what does the software need to do and kind of drive that sort of side of things. And then if you're building it yourself, you're going to need software engineers, right? You're going to need a group of people who can write the code and test it and deploy it and support it, maintain it, add new features, all that stuff, right? So, you're looking at a team of 8, 12 people. I mean, for what you said, how many sites globally, right?
Well, let's just say we've got like 2 dozen.
Yeah,
right?
a couple dozen.
You know, a mid-sized manufacturer.
So I mean, you're looking at a pretty good sized team. To even just for the initial build out, long-term support past that, you might be able to shrink the team a little bit, but that is usually not a good idea.
But if I play devil's advocate,
Okay.
and so I say I'm not going to do all that. I'm not going to hire a team of 30 people. You're in a different world. You're a controls engineer, right? And so you are just responsible for this one plant, this one facility.
Sure.
And you want to impress the plant manager. So you want to put a system in place, and you're going to do this on a shoestring budget, right? So you're going to download Ignition.
Sure.
You're going to go to IT and you're going to beg them for a virtual machine, right?
Yep.
Or you bring in some old laptop you had at home.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then, you're going to connect to a machine and you're going to just kind of like work your way through this process. So why can't that work? Why can't I just take what you built there and just roll that out across my enterprise? It seems simple.
That is unfortunately a really common mentality, and they're battling that is a challenge at any software company or any company that needs software, right? There's a huge gap between a prototype or proof of concept solution and a production-ready application. The way we approach prototypes or proofs of concept at Fuuz on our team is, when we're done with that initial POC, we take a look at it, we do a post, kind of learn all the lessons, document it all, and then we throw it away and start over. We may pull bits and pieces that are the best parts, but you really shouldn't try to transition a prototype or a proof of concept into a production application, because usually there is a huge amount of work that really isn't done in kind of those initial versions. And that's everything from, features that you kind of left aside. Yeah. Maybe you put a button there but didn't wire it up to anything yet because
some corners.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or features that are maybe you want but aren't quite there yet. All the way to, is it scalable? Is it highly available? What happens when you have millions of transactions stored in your system, right? In your little proof of concept prototype running on a little SQLite database or whatever, right? Like,
I've watched all these YouTube videos, and now it makes me an expert on software architecture because I've watched.
Snowflake is cool, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like you can cobble a lot of things together. I guess to go back to what you were talking about initially was the architecture, right, and the networking and the different skill sets that are required,
right,
right. So one thing that I didn't have a true appreciation of, to be quite honest, when I got into software with you back in the day, being a manufacturing engineer, I of course understand all the different engineering disciplines,
right,
that manufacturers tend to, we have EEs, we have MEs, we have MMs, we have all of these different disciplines in the business that do different things.
Yep.
Right. And then we got into software, and I'm like, well, yeah, but I just need one guy that really is good at writing code, right? You just, how hard is that, right? I did some G code back in the day. It's not that hard, G01. Yeah, it's going to go real fast. So that was kind of a good lesson for me getting into this, that as, maybe a business owner in manufacturing, I didn't quite fully understand. I wasn't a technical.
It's the same, right? It's the same sort of position where there's, a ton of specialties, areas of expertise in software. And you can hire somebody who's sort of the jack of all trades, master of none, right? And they might be able to build you something that's functional, technically. But there's a big difference between that and a kind of a production ready application that you're going to feel confident running your business on, across the globe, 24/7, 365.
Now, devil's advocate again, though, to a little
keep going,
right, is you look at some of the other platforms that are out there, whether they're on-prem or whatever, the low-no code capabilities, right? That's the big thing these days, citizen developers, right? So, I think that, I can build an app in Fuuz, right? I mean, some people on the team would argue with me on that point, but I feel like I'm pretty good at it. But, I don't know what's happening like under the hood. Behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on than what I'm exposed to with low-no code functionality, where I'm just dragging and dropping, and I feel empowered as an end user, which is the point of the platform. It's also the point of whether it's Ignition or whatever, right? They all kind of do that type of thing. I think the one thing for me is with Fuuz, like, I don't need to worry about standing up a SQL server to connect to and then figure out how to connect to it, because I'm not like a database guy. So I would have to watch a couple of YouTube videos probably to become a master of that, right? And then do all of these things. But then so great, now I've got a proof of concept. I solved a problem for whether it's one line, one machine, one plant, whatever, right? Who's going to review my work? Like, who's going to make sure that I've done a good enough job, to your point? Because even internally, we have I call it the wall. It's the wall between at our office, right? So we've got all the platform engineers on one side, and we've got all sales and implementation basically on the other side. And from an implementation standpoint, we look at a very different skill set than we do on the platform engineering side. And so it's just daunting to me how a manufacturer could go down this path thinking that you're going to get scalability, reliability, security, right? I mean, you can put something in the cloud. It's just on a different computer.
Unless cloud, solutions offer it offers scalability, but that's only because you can provision more servers without needing to go
throw
and
more at it,
ship hardware, order hardware. It's not going to automatically scale your software, right?
No.
You have to build the software to support that. And then there are layers upon layers of, configuration and tweaking and tuning, finding the right breakpoints, finding, scalability. You're looking, cooldown values and, making sure that you're not thrashing the basically scaling up and scaling down constantly, because that costs money. These are things that.
So the software, the things that I procure to cobble together to build my solution out may be relatively inexpensive. But what I'm learning is, I already knew this, honestly, but what I'm learning from this conversation is that the hidden cost is all of the other stuff that goes along in supporting that beyond just a simple small scale POC. Right. Because I could do that on a laptop, probably, or a thin client of some sort. But, going into the cloud and making all of that work for our customers is really where the challenge is. And that's really what I think sets Fuuz apart in the industry. Because we could have just created another on-premise SCADA tool that people could use to build no-code, low-code apps in and write Python and do all these things.
And honestly, it would have been a lot easier for us as an engineering team.
I can't even tell you how much money this has cost. But so that's really lacks, I think, appreciation in the manufacturing space. And, partly because I think there's this mindset on the OT side of the business that I can put something together.
Right.
And you can. A
Yeah.
lot of smart people out there.
Absolutely.
We've hired a lot of them. So I know they're extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
What I've seen is that those really smart people that we've got are really good at putting solutions together. And then when I turn that over to you guys to look at, you pick it apart. Like it was, I don't even know why we spent the time on it, because it's like, okay, this you can't roll out to more than 3 locations and
Yep.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So that's really what our customers are getting the advantage of with Fuuz being multi-tenant SaaS is they're getting our whole team of engineers that are super smart. And
Yeah.
Fuuz handles all your software development lifecycle stuff, which I think is great, right? We version everything. You have to go through this deployment process and you have to
Yep.
migrate things from build to QA to production. Things that if I just downloaded an application off the internet would not even
No.
register to
No.
me.
Yeah. No. I mean, you want that separation, right?
Yeah.
If you're just running an Ignition app, somebody can just click a button and that's live on whatever.
It's right now. It's
yep.
just live right now.
Yep. Which
That's
is terrifying. Yeah. I mean,
to me,
that's
yeah.
really scary if you're running your entire company on a
yeah. So if I would
But
I would assimilate that to I have a $50 million 6-axis multi-axis CNC mill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the size of this building that we're in. And I have a chunk of steel or aluminum or titanium sitting on this thing that probably cost $1 million.
Sure.
And it's just cutting away, right? Whatever part and whatever widget I'm trying to make. And my CAM programmer in the office decides he wants to tweak something in the program,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
We want to change some of the G code real quick. I'm just going to hit a button.
Yeah. Just tweak the feed rate, right?
Yeah,
That'll be
yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Hit the button, boom, it's live. What happens? My machine comes to a screeching halt and
Right.
it crashes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really the same thing with your MES software because we're controlling your manufacturing processes. You really don't want to have this direct. It's great. I'll full transparency. Like I love doing stuff in production
Right.
because you
It's
get instantaneous
instant feedback.
feedback.
Yeah.
But it's the worst thing that we can
Yeah.
do.
And there is a benefit to being able to move quickly, definitely, through a build process, through a QA process, into production. And you can definitely move quickly, but quickly doesn't necessarily mean that there is no process, right?
Yeah.
It just means that the process is there and it's efficient and you can kind of, you can move through that, complete the steps that you need to complete and then get your kind of changes live, right? If you need to make some, quick tweak, you found something, some new feature that you need, you can do that in Fuuz, but the process is still there. So, yeah.
So going back to the cloud infrastructure, so I mean, anybody can do it, right? Not the right people can do it. Any manufacturer could go down this path of creating and building their own enterprise infrastructure and then deploying their solutions on this backbone.
If they're willing to put the money into it.
Yeah. But like once you get it put in place, I mean, it just kind of like self-sustains, right? It's good to go. Like you don't.
No, definitely
Okay.
not. Yep. No. And that's, so there's kind of two parts to that, right? There's the required maintenance of just making sure all of your servers, your control plane, whatever it is you're running on is kept up to date so that you're not vulnerable to, security vulnerabilities or, whatever kind of bugs or crashes might be present in, the Linux version if you're running on Linux machines, or the Windows if you're running Windows servers. I don't know why you should be. You shouldn't be, but, it's an opinion.
That's a note for all of you out there.
Yes, right. We use Kubernetes. Our entire platform is deployed on Kubernetes, and so you've got the control plane version, you've got the node versions, and then you have all of the kind of system level components that control things like auto scaling and DNS. Those also have their own versions, their own patch releases that you have to keep up to date. And with a lot of that stuff, you can just update it and pray, but you probably shouldn't, right? there's a whole process that has to go through of, testing those patches on a canary system, right? On a system that isn't live, make sure everything works, let it run there for a little while, promote it to QA, and promote it to production. It's kind of the same process, right? And you have to have somebody who keeps an eye on what are those patches coming out, what needs to be updated. That's an entire job. That patch management is a discipline in software engineering that is not easy, and it's something that you have to have somebody do, or you'll very quickly find that you are out of the support window for whatever you're running on, and now you're in a case where if something does go horribly wrong, whether it's Microsoft or whatever kind of core software you're using, if you go to them and say, hey, we found this problem, they're just going to say, well, update.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have to update 6 versions at once, which never goes well.
Right.
So there's that half, right? Just keeping up to date so that you aren't falling behind and becoming vulnerable to security incidents, things like that. But then there's the fact that, software is always progressing, and there are always improvements coming out, new features coming available in kind of these core server versions, new efficiency gains, right? If you're talking cloud providers, there's new instance types. There's a huge push now.
My eyes roll back.
There's a huge push now for servers that are based on ARM processors, which can offer really significant cost savings over the kind of older CPU infrastructure. The point is, you can't just switch over. There's some work you have to do. If you can do that work, then you could save 20 or 30% on your cloud compute costs. But it's not free, right?
Yeah.
So having a team of people who kind of are aware of what's coming up in terms of the new features and are able to, take advantage of those. Do you want that 20% cost savings? Well, you can't just fire your whole development team and then expect that that'll come along, right?
Yeah.
So there's those two kind of categories, just keeping up with things and then taking advantage of the latest and greatest features and making sure that you're always, benefiting from the constant progress of, kind of the cloud providers and the core open source software community, things like that.
Yeah. Well, there's so much.
Yeah, there is
involved. To add to that complexity with the Fuuz platform is all of our customers are on the same version of the software, right at all times.
Yep.
So, I mean, that really, from your perspective, from an engineering perspective, what's the value, what's the benefit to a Fuuz customer by us doing that? But basically, we have versions.
Right.
Yeah. Technically, every software has some kind of version somewhere.
Right. Exactly. Whether it's technically just updated, in kind of a constant delivery where every single code change makes a change to production, goes through that process as quick as possible, or it's, daily, weekly, monthly, ours are monthly. The benefit, we've definitely had customers come to us and say, well, can we, not update the core platform, or can we change the release lifecycle so that, the updates roll out on a different day? I don't know, typically it's, oh, well, we don't work on this particular day. Can we update then instead? And there are a few big problems with that. One is that, again, every customer we have is on kind of shared infrastructure, right? So you can't necessarily just, leave one customer behind. But even kind of, if we could solve those technical problems, there are a lot of good reasons why you wouldn't want to do that from a support perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like, it becomes much more difficult to kind of help customers solve any issues they might have if it's sort of a wild west of who's on what versions and when did you last update and, that kind of thing. We currently time our updates so that we have engineers on staff ready. It's the same time, same day and time every month. So it's predictable. And then we always have people on staff ready, keeping an eye on things so that we're ready to respond if there is any kind of issue, right? Which you couldn't guarantee if these updates were spread all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then again, you get that as I mentioned, right, just keeping up to date with the latest kind of software patches and security vulnerabilities, addressing security vulnerabilities. We're doing that in those software version updates every month. We're keeping up to date with those vulnerabilities in the software that you're using in Fuuz. And so we're making sure that your platform is secure and up to date and ready to go. Being able to opt out of updates is often you're really opting into hurting yourself in the long term, right? You're opting into less secure software.
I think it's a real conservative mindset, right? People are, they get apprehensive about all of that kind of thing because they know what happens when, say, a new Microsoft Office update rolls out and or whatever, right? A new update on your phone. And so I think oftentimes people are nervous about that. But I'm curious. So you guys do all of this work. And you keep track of all the versions and the updates and the patches and like that's great. So that takes a lot of burden off of the customer. But I'd imagine, man, it just sounds like once a month when we go through this process, like how involved is the customer in this? They must be like doing all sorts of work to.
We, on the engineering team, work very hard to retain backwards compatibility for solutions as far back as is feasible. And currently, that's essentially anything that's ever been built on the Fuuz platform. We have customers who are still running solutions on the platform they developed in 2018, 2019, right? And a lot of times, we have customers who will kind of come to us and say, hey, well, we'd like an improvement to this solution that we built in 2019. And it's just been ticking along, running perfectly in the intervening, the 6 years or whatever it's been, 5 years. And there's sometimes we take a look at that stuff and it's a little time capsule, right? It's amazing some of the things that are still out there and ticking along. And another common kind of entertaining thing that'll happen is, we announce our releases, of course. We have published release notes that are public and the lifecycle is well documented. And, sometimes customers will not realize that is our release lifecycle. They catch wind of that and they say, oh, no, you can't update. Like,
we've been doing it all.
Not realizing that's how it's all, like, they've been using the software for, in some cases, years.
Yep.
And they've just never noticed that we update once a month because there's never been a problem.
Right.
So knock on wood. Knock on wood. This is a good, nice
there,
wood table, definitely.
But yeah, I think so. Not only have they not noticed it, but they also aren't thinking about it in these terms because what we're doing is so much unlike every other system out there, right? We see customers that are running various different ERP software that are cloud-based, that are even multi-tenant, that go through these major changes,
right?
Whether it's annual, biannual, whatever it is, and it requires a tremendous amount of effort on the customer's part to test and validate, migrate. It's like a mini re-implementation, every time. Yep. So what you're saying is that we update the Fuuz platform every month, and not once since 2018, since we started doing this, has one of our customers had to get involved in that process.
Right.
Well, that's pretty cool, I guess. I mean,
I think it's pretty cool.
As a customer,
it takes a lot of work on our part to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because there are definitely things in the platform that are used in solutions that we would love to get rid of. Because they're old, right? I mean, they've been around for a long time. We've learned a lot since we added those features.
Well, there's better practices, right? Like you said, as time goes on, technology evolves.
Yep.
And that's one of the things about the platform that I really like is that we're always looking at what's next.
Yeah, we're always learning. Yeah, absolutely.
Where I think your traditional software vendors, they have to plan for these things so far ahead of time. I mean, we are, you look at the roadmaps, for example, for, some of the competitors, and it's like, well, we're going to get that feature for you, but it's like 3 years from now. And
right.
How does that help a manufacturer if they have to wait years for a feature? That's one thing I can say is that we were just talking about this before we jumped in here, right? We have, I don't want to say we've never had one, but I can't quantify right now, sitting here today, how many platform bugs have been reported by a customer.
Yeah.
I can't think of one. I don't want to say there hasn't been one, but
Yeah. Well, and I would definitely chalk that up to our internal QA process, right? Where, we use internally, our team and the solutions team uses the Fuuz platform in sort of a nightly build mode.
yeah.
Well in advance of that going out to customers. So, in those rare instances where there is a problem, it's typically reported the day after we roll that feature out. We get it fixed, and that never reaches a customer's eyes, which is how we want it to go, right?
Yeah.
So
I submitted a couple this past weekend.
Great.
Actually, I was having fun just building some dashboards, just working on extending our MES offerings. But you learn a lot in doing that process and going through that. So I think the last point that I really want to cover is we didn't really talk about it much was, yes, we're doing all these things. Every customer's on the latest version. You guys are doing all the heavy lifting, right? So our customers just focus on their solutions, whether it's MES, WMS, whatever.
What you need to run your business. Yep.
Whatever they need to run their business, all they got to do is learn the low-no code tools, and they can build to their heart's content whatever they want, even if they have a Makerspace that they want to
Exactly.
apply the platform to, or a supplier portal, or all of the different quoting tools and pricing calculators and everything our customers have done. So that allows their IT and OT teams to really focus on maturing the business and evolving the business and not focusing on the software, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Truly, in that sense, Fuuz is an enabling technology as opposed to something that the business has to continually invest in people and other resources to kind of keep up.
Yeah, you made the statement earlier. Those OT people, right? The kind of operational folks really like to be able to get in and make kind of quick and dirty applications that solve a point solution, and they can do that in Fuuz. That's a capability that the platform offers, right?
Yeah.
We're not taking that away from anybody. We're moving it into the cloud.
Yeah.
So,
a couple of things that I was just thinking of as you were saying that the hybrid nature of the system, right? And that we have our gateway, which enables customers to kind of bridge that divide between the physical world in their plant and their four walls and Fuuz in the cloud, right? Without having to add on third-party software bolt-ons. I think that's one of our big claim to fames is, Fuuz is the platform.
Right.
Fuuz is not just another solution or application that you're going to have to go out and augment with other things later. Right. Most of the tools out there, you have to bolt other things on. They only do one little task. They do it really well, but they only do one task.
Right.
So Fuuz has taken a different approach to say, we want everything to be in one system, one environment, one tool to learn, maintain, support, etc., train end users on, all of that good stuff. So I think that's super important for our potential customers, and current customers probably don't even realize half of this as well.
Sometimes, yeah.
We have a lot of conversations like at our cab meetings, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
How are you doing that? We always get asked, how is that even possible? So many times. But yeah, the other thing is cloud, right? So it's not new. It's been around a long time. SaaS is not new. Software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platforms everybody has a service, right?
Yeah.
So why is it beneficial to our customers that they're on the Fuuz platform running in the cloud, as opposed to, let's just say, all other things aside, right? They already have a whole team of people to do all the things we talked about before. So they could do this themselves. But what's the inherent benefit to having the architecture of Fuuz and the multi-tenancy? And I'm not going to steal your thunder. And
there's a lot of benefits, obviously. The kind of abstract, why would you want to move to the cloud, right? The core kind of driving reason that a lot of people start with is that there are a lot of cost savings and kind of operational savings over having to manage your own on-premise kind of IT server racks,
Hardware.
data center. Exactly, right? Like
the CDW bill will be reduced.
right. Yes. Yeah. And you can switch that from a, I'm not a business administration guy, but you can kind of move a lot of that into a subscription model that you can reduce or cut at any time, right? Without needing, and you're going to be left with a bunch of server hardware that you don't need anymore.
You've got all these assets you're depreciating
now
over time.
You're try to get rid of them, and so
they're on eBay.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. So that's from an operational perspective, it simplifies a lot of that. But even once you get to the actual applications themselves, right? Having your kind of MES in the cloud means that's accessible from anywhere that you want it to be, right? Whether you're on an airplane or on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world, right? You can always pull open that application and check in. You could do that with VPNs and a bunch of kind of on-premise applitions and things.
That sounds like one more thing we have to manage.
Right now, you get your VPN appliance, and you got to make sure that that's set up to be secure, and it's a mess, right? Yeah. And that's beneficial by itself just for a single site, right? But it's really when you start talking about multi-site enterprises, especially global enterprises, that a cloud solution and cloud infrastructure really becomes necessary, right? Yeah. If you want to, suck in data from your entire enterprise across the entire globe and understand what's the overall picture of what's going on, right? Everywhere from down at the kind of transactional level all the way up to kind of a financial level, you have to have a cloud solution that can pull all of that in, because it doesn't help you to have an MES deployed at 24 different sites across the globe with a little database in that site, right? Yeah, you can't get to that data. No. So having that all right, exactly, yeah. So having that all collected and kind of you can slice across all of that, all of those facilities, right? Kind of aggregate, report, all of that kind of fun stuff, and control. You can go the other direction as well if you've got a cloud solution, right? Kind of enforce, a level of sort of uniformity and consistency across your enterprise that would be impossible if every site manages their own little custom special MES, which is often how it goes.
It's oftentimes the case. So, yeah, even within a facility, they might have different versions, different instances,
different lines, different departments. You get exactly.
Doing one right now.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So, and then I think to the manufacturers out there that, all right, maybe this is a lot of noise with all the work and all the effort, and we can do this. Sure. And I think the other thing that that we're offering as well with our own multi-tenancy is the economies of scale.
Right.
That not just spread across your own business, your own enterprise, your multi-sites, but across all of our customers who are taking advantage of a shared set of services on the platform, right? So that's I don't know that we can put a number on it, but I'm sure it's significant in terms of savings.
It is, yeah. One of the things that we discovered pretty quickly as we were building out our cloud infrastructure is that especially scalability and high availability are expensive. High availability in particular, right? If you really want a rock solid high availability configuration, typically you're going to need 3 copies of everything running at a time. So that's you take your biggest pieces of your solution, typically your kind of core database. In our case, we have a message broker as well, and we've got to run 3 copies of that software, which is you're just boom, you've tripled your cost, right?
Yeah.
And
to do it properly.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing is you might be able to get away without that high availability setup.
If you're okay being down for a day or two.
Right. And it'll run fine right up until it doesn't. And then you're stuck.
Right.
So what we found is that, that additional cost, if we were to do that for just one customer, a lot of the times it's hard to justify, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really expensive.
Right. Once you go into private cloud or something like that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. It becomes a steep.
Yeah. Exactly. But once you start spreading that out across, a large number of customers, large enough that that cost comes down, and it starts to make a lot more sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing that, we can then offer that high availability guarantee, that scalability, without it costing, again, triple what it might otherwise. So
that's a good point. I mean, it's still more costly than
Sure.
software by itself.
sure, yeah.
So
right.
if you're looking at face value, right?
Sure.
It's difficult to justify, but that's the point of this conversation is that there's a lot of things that are hidden costs out there that folks don't realize.
Yeah.
Or they do, and they just choose to ignore because it goes into a different bucket in
Sure.
the accounting
Yeah.
department.
Right. Exactly. It's
That's IT's
it's-
budget.
right.
So, oh well.
it's personnel rather than software, right? Like,
Yeah. So that's cool. So just to, like wrap it up, here, this has been, I've learned a few things. So the, infrastructure is hard
Yep. Yeah.
is what I've learned to do it right.
To do it right.
It's
Yeah.
hard. Right. Cause I can watch a lot of YouTubes, but I don't think I could do what you guys do.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time and expertise.
I wouldn't do it right at all. And it's not as simple as just signing into AWS or Azure and saying, set me up some servers to run my MES.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's easy, but yep.
So then you start getting a bill, right? And then your bills go up based on usage
Yep.
typically, right? So they start off pretty inexpensive and then ramp up from there if you actually use the application, which is another difference that we have with the platform is it's one set fee for our customer, right? Per plant or whatever. So they don't have to worry about that. So it's kind of like a unlimited,
Right.
and we can do that because we're multi-tenant.
Right. That
and
economy
we're
of
spreading
scale.
the costs out.
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
a lot of, huge benefits. I mean, we've seen, I remember one customer that we were working with that had Ignition, right? And blew up their SQL server, too many rows
Yeah.
of data, completely like shut down their whole network for a day. Just one bad line of code, presumably,
Yeah. Something went haywire.
That's all it can take. And some of those things that we mitigate in the Fuuz platform, whether the customer's doing it or a partner or we're doing it, we've built in guardrails, right, to help prevent a lot of that and help the customer maintain that reliability. So and we didn't really talk much about security. We'll save that for another one.
Oh yeah.
Because that's a pretty hot topic.
I could talk about that for another hour.
Yeah. Well, we will have another podcast and
Yep.
we will talk about the security, in particular with the Fuuz platforms. I think what we do is pretty wild.
Yep.
Pretty crazy. But it's so necessary these days.
Yep.
With everything that's happening in the world. And the last thing a manufacturer wants is their information being exposed or, worse yet, someone being able to tamper with their equipment on the shop floor.
Yeah.
There's so many variables back to that point of the conservative nature of manufacturers wanting to make sure that things are safe. But ultimately, having your own software on-prem on your own server does not make you
Not necessarily
any more secure.
Yeah.
Probably less, because you don't
especially if it's homegrown.
Yeah. And if you don't keep all of those patches going and all the updates going, there's vulnerabilities that are constantly being exposed and
Yep.
so all good stuff. Anyway, I don't want to steal the thunder for that conversation, but thanks for joining me today, Lance.
Of course.
I'm sure we'll have customers and future prospects now digging you up on LinkedIn, asking you all sorts of questions.
Not a problem.
So really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.